All right, welcome to World War One, Day 2. Today, the actual fighting is going to start. Before we get things all messy, let's take a look back at what transpired yesterday, just really briefly. Okay, so remember, the trouble started in June when Gavrilo Princip shot the Archduke of Austria Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo and made his uncle, the Austrian emperor, very mad. And so Austria declares war on Serbia, right? Because they were Serbian nationalists, and Austria blamed Serbia for the death of the Archduke. And so these two countries go to war, but then we have Russia over here, the big bear, and it wants to be the protector of other Slavic peoples. We talked about that yesterday. And so Russia comes to the aid of Austria-Hungary. But unfortunately, Russia only has one war plan that it can sort of start. It's just got one plan in the filing cabinet. And that plan calls for Russia to send half its forces against Germany and half its forces against Austria-Hungary. Now, before this time, Austria-Hungary had asked Germany, or Franz Joseph had asked Wilhelm II, both of whom he met yesterday, and there's his awesome mustache. He said, look, we're going to declare war on Serbia, but if any real trouble starts, will you have our back? And the German emperor said, no matter what, we got you. We're in this together. And so Austria declares war on Serbia. Russia starts to mobilize against Austria and Germany. And at this point, Germany gets nervous, and they declare war on Russia and then attack France. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but we will see in just a minute why they started their war on Russia with an attack on France. Okay. And because Germany attacks France, Britain declares war on Germany. Okay, so we have Russia mobilizing against Austria and Germany, Germany declaring war on France and Russia, and when they invade France, they bring Britain into the war. Okay, so now we have all of these powers. The major powers are all at war with each other by August of 1914. And basically, there's going to be two armed camps. There's going to be the Central Powers, which will be Austria-Hungary and the other nations. On this map, they're in that sort of burnt orange color. All right, and it makes sense. They're called the Central Powers because, as this turns out to be really bad for them, they're stuck right in the middle with other nations that we see here on the map called the Allies on both sides. Okay, so Britain, France, and Russia and other nations are the Allies, and Germany and Austria-Hungary and other nations are the Central Powers. Okay, which is better than we saw before the war when they were the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. That was very confusing. So now we'll call them Central Powers and Allies from now on. And as you can see, other countries remain neutral, like Spain and initially the United States. So I guess smoking a pipe is a symbol for not fighting or other things. So this is where we're at in August of 1914, and the armies start marching. And the conflict grinds along. Now, I want to encourage you to actually listen to these notes. If you want to just pause it and write it down and not listen, I'm not going to stop you. But I think you get more out of it if you listen to what I have to say. And as such, I'm going to give you secret code words that you can include in your notes to get full credit for your notes. So on this page of notes, circle the word grinds. Okay? Circle it, highlight it, underline it, draw an arrow at it. That's the secret code word to get full credit for this part of the notes. Okay? Well, we're going to have two major areas in the war. In war, they call them theaters, okay, which is kind of strange, but that's what they call them. We're going to have the Western Front, which is in northern France and in Belgium. This is where most of the fighting and most of the dying takes place. Now, why did it happen there? Well, it all goes back to another war plan. Okay, Russia had their plans. Germany has their plans. All the nations are afraid of each other. They're planning to go to war at some point, so they all have war plans ready to go. And Germany's plan is called the Schlieffen Plan. And the Schlieffen Plan, named for the person who invented it, General Plan, and that's comedy. No, General Schlieffen, he developed this plan based on their experience of fighting France in 1870. Now, if you remember, I talked yesterday about France absolutely got destroyed by Germany in 1870. And what had happened was that the German forces had streamed across the common border of the two countries and quickly came around and captured Paris. And when you capture Paris, basically France will fall. So that's what they want to do again, but this time they're going to do it differently. This time, what they want to do, in the meantime, because France got just taken out in 1870 by the Germans, the French have built lots of, what color did they say? Let's make them blue. They've built lots of fortifications along their common border so that the Germans can't just attack. And so what Schlieffen decides is, well, we won't attack them there. What we'll do is we'll go through these other countries and attack them from this side. So they're going to go through Luxembourg, Belgium, and part of the Netherlands, and they want to swing around really wide around all the forts and everything and capture Paris once again. Okay? And they think once Paris is captured, France will give up again, and that will be it for the war in the West. And what happens, it goes very well initially. The Belgians resist, but they are quickly overcome. And the German army, let's get a different color of pen here. Pen color, let's go blue. The German army goes through Belgium, and they get close to Paris, but they don't get all the way there. Now the problem with an army moving fast is it moves faster than its supplies. So the German army gets almost to their goal, almost to Paris, when they have to stop and wait for supplies. In this time, that gives, let's see here, let's use a magenta, let's use cyan, whatever that is. That gives the French and the British are right over here, time to come in and defend Paris, and the Germans never take Paris. And if you look, when they finally meet, they're at this river called the River Marne. And the French and the British are able to stop the German army at what will be called the First Battle of the Marne. And it gives people some sort of idea how different this war is going to be. Okay? Over 1 million people take part in this. There are hundreds of thousands of casualties and people killed in a single battle. Okay? But with this, the Schlieffen Plan has failed. France didn't drop out of the war. And now Russia has finally gotten its act together, and Germany is going to have to fight France and Russia and Britain all at the same time. And Russia's on one side, France is on the other. So this is going to be very difficult for the Germans. In the West, war quickly becomes what we call trench warfare. And you're going to watch a video that'll give you a lot of good details about trench warfare. But essentially, there's going to be a lot of new weapons and new tactics, and it's going to be very deadly to just be standing around. So the troops, they don't want to stand there and get shot, but their commanding officers won't let them just run away. And so they can't go forward and they can't go backward. So what they do is they go down. They dig down into the earth, into trenches where they can remain alive while their commanders figure out what to do. So trench warfare in the West, it's very deadly. The armies settle in to basically fixed positions that are not going to move from for a long time. And the troops are going to be forced to live in these trenches, which, as you saw, they're dirt. And Western Europe isn't like Southern California. It rains regularly, so most of the time they're in the mud. And new weapons, we've had the Industrial Revolution since the last wars that we had, which was way back with Napoleon. There's all kinds of new weapons and deadly, nasty things being used for the first time in World War I, and the commanders aren't really sure what to do about it. There's a bonus lecture which is going to be up, which is totally extra credit if you want to watch it, and if you're into this kind of thing, it's about the new weapons that come about in 1914 to 1918 and why they're so deadly and what they do and why 10 million men are killed in this war. So, two huge battles we'll talk more about next week. The Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme are both horrific battles. One is Germany versus France, and one is Germany versus Britain. And we'll see the Battle of the Somme. By the end of the morning of the first day of the battle, 21,000 British soldiers were dead. Okay, that's just one morning of this battle, which is going to last 2 weeks. So these things just grind on and on. And so, speaking of grind, that reminds me of our secret bonus word. And the secret bonus word for this slide that you need to circle, highlight, or point with arrows is unsanitary. Okay, so circle unsanitary to get full credit for these notes. All right. The Eastern Front. We talked about the West. Let's talk about the East. That's where Russia is going to fight against Germany and Austria. Right. Basically, it's going to go along the border between Germany and Russia, which we saw is quite long and extensive. And the Russians are finally going to get their troops moving, and they're going to push into Germany and Austria, but pretty soon things aren't going to go well for the Russians. Now, when if you're going to fight a war against Russia, you need to remember a couple of things. Number one, they never run out of land. Russia has 13 time zones. Okay, they can always retreat until you run out of troops. Well, that's what they did to Napoleon. That's what they're going to do to Hitler. It's going to be a little different this time. In addition to never running out of land, they never run out of people. So here is a picture of Russian troops marching into battle, and Russia essentially has an inexhaustible supply of troops to send to the front. What they don't have an inexhaustible supply, and you can see it in this picture a little bit, is weapons and supplies. If you'll notice down here in front, you see a few guys have rifles. Many of them don't. And because they have lots of people and not a lot of rifles, essentially the troops are told, and this is true, to run into battle. And if you don't have a gun, you partner up with someone that has a gun. And when he gets shot and falls down, you pick up his gun and then you have his gun. So they're gun sharing as they head into combat, which doesn't create a lot of confidence on the part of the troops. And so they begin to have a lot of casualties. But they keep bringing more and more forces up. And eventually they decide that they can't keep up technologically, so they're just going to use their people to win the war and overwhelm the Germans with just huge numbers of Russian soldiers. Their essential strategy is, we have more people than you have bullets, and at the end of the battle, you'll be out of bullets, and we still have people. This, again, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence on the part of the Russian soldier to essentially go out there and be a bullet sponge for Mother Russia. And so pretty soon, the Russian war effort is going to fall apart, and they are going to have a revolution that we're going to talk about in our next unit, but not right now. But it still keeps a huge part of the German army trapped in the east and unavailable to fight against the French and the British in the west. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Germany's pinned down on two fronts.